Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. has temporarily halted President Trump's radical plan to freeze trillions of dollars in federal grants and loans, even though the money's already been appropriated by Congress. U.S. District Judge Lauren L. Alican said Tuesday she would decide by next week whether to make the injunction permanent. The ruling came after several nonprofits and attorneys general from 22 states filed lawsuits arguing the order would have a devastating impact on hundreds of thousands of recipients who rely on federal grants and loans for their operations. At the White House, President Trump's newly minted press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, defended Trump's unprecedented actions.
It means no more funding for illegal DEI programs. It means no more funding for the Green New scam that has cost American taxpayers tens of billions of dollars. It means no more funding for transgenderism and wokeness across our federal bureaucracy and agencies.
As Trump's federal spending freeze briefly took effect Tuesday, Medicaid reimbursement portals went down in all 50 states, cutting off compensation to hospitals and clinics that provide health care to children, low-income families, and people with disabilities. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer said Trump's actions would likely impact universities, nonprofits, food assistance programs, hospitals, and rural health centers, organizations that assist disabled veterans, and much more.
This decision is lawless. It's disruptive, it's dangerous, it's cruel, it's illegal, and it's unconstitutional. Donald Trump has done a lot of bad things in the last week, but nothing's worse than this.
Washington Democratic Senator Patty Murray called Trump's executive order a brazen and illegal move. Maine Independent Senator Angus King said, quote, "If this stands, Congress may as well adjourn," unquote. Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders declared of Trump he is not a king. We'll have more on this story after headlines. The White House has announced plans to offer all 2.3 million federal workers 8 months of salary and benefits in exchange for their resignation, in a move condemned by labor unions as an unprecedented violation of laws governing buyout payments. A memo sent by the Office of Personnel Management to federal employees Tuesday urges anyone wishing to accept the deal to type the word resign into the body of an email replying to the offer. The American Federation of Government Employees, which represents more than 800,000 federal government and Washington, D.C. workers, said Trump's goal was to create chaos. Its national president, Everett Kelly, said, quote, "Between the flurry of anti-worker executive orders and policies, it's clear that the Trump administration's goal is to turn the federal government into a toxic environment where workers cannot stay even if they want to," unquote. President Trump Monday fired 2 leaders of the National Labor Relations Board in a major attack on workers' rights and labor unions. Trump's surprise removal of Democratic NLRB member Gwen Wilcox came even though federal law says board members can only be fired for neglect or malfeasance. Trump also ousted the NLRB General Counsel Jennifer Abruzzo, who wrote in a parting statement, quote, "If the agency does not fully effectuate its congressional mandate in the future, I expect workers with assistance from their advocates will take matters into their own hands in order to get well-deserved dignity and respect in the workplace, as well as a fair share of the significant value they add to their employers' operations," she said. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt made her debut in the briefing room Tuesday, admitting to reporters the Trump administration believes all undocumented immigrants are criminals and will be targeted for mass detention and deportation. Raids are taking place nationwide, with thousands arrested since Trump's inauguration in cities like Chicago and New York City, where Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem joined ICE, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, in operations that began Tuesday, live tweeting the raids. ICE is reportedly planning a round of raids in Aurora, Colorado Thursday, and 3 more cities are expected to be targeted next week. President Trump is signing the Laken-Riley Act into law today, his first piece of legislation since returning to office. The bill expands mandatory detention and possible deportation of undocumented people who are accused, though not convicted, of nonviolent theft crimes such as shoplifting. This comes as ICE has been directed to meet a quota of between 1,200 and 1,500 arrests per day as Trump plans to pack ICE detention centers, including those run by for-profit prison companies. In related news, Oklahoma's State Board of Education has unanimously approved a rule that'll force parents to provide proof of their children's citizenship and immigration status when they're enrolled in school. The policy still needs to be approved by Oklahoma's legislature and governor. Meanwhile, deportation flights from the U.S. to Colombia resumed Tuesday after a diplomatic spat over the abuse of asylum seekers who describe being shackled. This is Carlos Gomez, a deportee who arrived in Bogota on Tuesday.
The food they served was bad. Sometimes they gave awful burritos, terrible food, and we were locked up and sleeping for 10 or 12 hours because we had nothing else to do. We didn't even know if it was day or night. We were treated worse than prisoners.
The Senate has confirmed Sean Duffy as Secretary of Transportation on a vote of 77 to 22. Duffy's a former reality TV star, climate denier, and four-term Republican congressmember from Wisconsin who's worked as a lobbyist since resigning from Congress in 2019. As his first official act, Duffy moved to roll back the Biden administration's fuel efficiency standards for new cars and trucks. On Monday, senators voted 68 to 29 to confirm the billionaire hedge fund manager Scott Bessent as U.S. Treasury Secretary, with 16 Democrats supporting the nomination. In a statement, Public Citizen called Bessent an oligarch who spent a career serving rich clients, adding, quote, by ignoring climate change as a financial risk, Trump's Treasury Department under Bessent is on a path that could devastate hard-working families, they said. Senate confirmation hearings open today for President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., an environmental attorney known for spreading public health conspiracy theories and disinformation. He's claimed HIV may not cause AIDS, that COVID-19 was designed to spare Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people, and that chemicals in the U.S. water supply are leading more children to be gay and transgender. Ahead of RFK Jr.'s appearance before the Senate Committee on Finance, his cousin, Caroline Kennedy, the former U.S. ambassador to Japan and Australia, daughter of President John F. Kennedy, called on senators to reject RFK Jr.'s nomination.
I've known Bobby my whole life. We grew up together. It's no surprise that he keeps birds of prey as pets, because Bobby himself is a predator. Bobby is addicted to attention and power. Bobby preys on the desperation of parents of sick children, vaccinating his own kids, while building a following hypocritically discouraging other parents from vaccinating theirs.
We'll play more of Caroline Kennedy's video to senators urging them not to confirm Robert Kennedy later in the broadcast. Kennedy's confirmation hearing follows President Trump's stop work order for all global health funding through the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID. On Monday, the Trump administration explicitly ordered foreign health organizations to stop administering drugs for HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis purchased with U.S. aid, even if healthcare workers already have the medications on hand. On Tuesday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio issued a waiver for life-saving drugs under PEPFAR, the president's emergency plan for AIDS relief started by former President George W. Bush, which is credited with saving more than 25 million lives worldwide. But it's not clear whether Rubio's waiver will reverse Trump's freeze on funding for drugs for HIV/AIDS prevention, outreach and testing, and other programs. More than 500,000 people have returned to an unrecognizable northern Gaza in the past 72 hours, according to Palestinian authorities. People hoping to return home describe the utter decimation of North Gaza after 15 months of relentless Israeli bombings and attacks. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces killed at least 2 Palestinians in fresh raids that began overnight. One of the victims was identified as 25-year-old Osama Omar Abu Haija from Jenin. This comes as Israeli lawmakers have advanced a bill that would further facilitate the theft and purchase of land for illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Israel's also continued its attacks on southern Lebanon, where at least 5 people were injured earlier today and another 24 wounded on Tuesday in Israeli airstrikes. Senate Democrats have blocked a bill that would sanction the International Criminal Court over its arrest warrants against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for possible war crimes in Gaza. UN experts and others have warned the legislation would set a dangerous precedent for the erosion of international law. This comes as Trump and Netanyahu are set to meet at the White House next week. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, protests broke out in Kinshasa Tuesday as people denounced inaction from the international community to end the raging conflict in the eastern city of Goma, where M23 forces have consolidated power. The UN says over 500,000 people have been forced to flee their homes in January alone due to the escalating violence in the eastern DRC. Congo's foreign minister has called for targeted sanctions and an arms embargo against Rwanda over its backing of M23 soldiers and for Rwanda to withdraw its troops from the region. Hundreds of foreign military contractors crossed into Rwanda from Goma today as they surrendered to the UN after M23 fighters consolidated control of the eastern DRC's largest city. UN envoy for the DRC, Viviane van de Per, addressed the Security Council Tuesday via video link from Goma wearing a helmet and flak jacket as she pleaded with Rwanda and DRC to work toward a diplomatic solution.
We remind all parties of their obligation to uphold international humanitarian law and stress that attacks on United Nations peacekeepers may constitute war crimes. The degree of suffering that the population in Goma and its environments is enduring is truly unimaginable.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.